So, KA, we're back again. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good. Good to see you.
So KA and I, let me just get that out of my mouth properly. For those who don't know KA, she's known as Kerri-Ann. She is a brilliant mum,
Mm.
extraordinarily creative, and in the last episode, loves to be outside the box. What does that mean, KA?
Oh, look, can we just go exploring? Let's have an adventure. Let's think of things in a different way. Let's ask different questions. Let's see what we can discover that we haven't seen before.
Love that.
Mm.
Well, I want to ask you a very big question.
Cool.
Cool.
Cool. I'm ready.
That's an Aussie way of going. Okay, let's see where this goes. Um, what happens when you believe that you've got a word from God? So God tells you something,
Yep.
and it doesn't come to being.
Brilliant question.
That's why I'm
I love
asking it, and I'm asking you to answer it.
it. I love it. And look, I know so many of us are asking this question or have asked this question or have been in this place, like the Lord said, and I felt this and I know this, but it didn't happen. And a big part of my journey has been an exploration of that answer. What does it look like? Why? How come? What's going on? And wanting to discover how to come out of places of grief and hopelessness where my hope has been deferred and discover how to live in that place of the tree of life where my dreams are realized. And so it is a very valid question because so many of us will experience that in our lifetime. And so we want to know what is going on in this space. Like I felt the Lord say, or I got a prophetic word, and then I held on to it. And how long do I hold on to it for? And then, but it's not come to pass, and it should have done. And so we ask all these questions because we're trying to understand where the Lord's taking us. So I think we've got to start first with understanding what the prophetic is, and that, when we receive a prophetic word, whether it's that the Lord has spoken to us or somebody else has come to us and given us a prophetic word of something that we're hoping and dreaming for, we know that we're getting a glimpse into the future. We're getting a glimpse into something that is to come. But quite often prophetic words can be a little bit abstract or a bit cryptic or a little bit like, how specific is that? And is that for now or is that for later? Or when do we feel like, what does that look like? And how? And so we've got to learn this beautiful conversation that we get to have with the Lord of the journey that is now set before us. And whether that actually sits and resonates well in our truth center, has our spirit come to recognize that this has some life on it, that this has some substance in it. And in a place of beautiful community, we can work that out. And so I just want to talk from example's sake because I find that's the best place to be. And Matt, you've walked this example out with me, so I figured this is a beautiful one to jump into. Early on when Matt and I first got to meet, I got to step in and do prophetic mentoring with you, and it was incredible. Highly recommend prophetic mentoring with Matt. It's just stunning. In that experience and that encounter, I got a few prophetic words and they were beautiful. And I had a few dreams that were beautiful. And there was this language that was starting to form for me and for my family that would indicate that potentially we were getting the opportunity to pack up and move and go and join Matt and the crew down in Sydney. So that's like 15, 16 hours away, whatever it is by car, a decent drive or two over a couple of days. But this thought of packing up and moving, and, Sydney was coming up in conversations, and it was coming up in my dream space, and it was coming to me in prophetic words. And I was trying to discern what that looked like. And so as a bit of an adventure lover and one who was like, I am so ready to pack up and move. I'm like, I'm all in, Lord, you calling my number. Let's go. I'm packing my bags. We got boxes in faith and we started packing, and my kids are like, Mom, we don't necessarily want to move. So I had one daughter who did and a son and a daughter who didn't. And we had this conversation unfolding inside our family home. And I was holding it all in this understanding that I think this is what the Lord is saying. I'm going to step into it and see what happens. I'm going to be brave because it doesn't make sense and I don't know how we can make it happen. So it's a place of impossibility, but I don't want to be scared of impossible. Let's just step into it and see what the Lord does. And I had enough of a history with him to know that I had permission to do that. and permission to take what I was receiving and how I was understanding it and step into a place of let's explore these prophetic words, these dreams, these understandings that potentially Sydney is our new home. And we explored it out. It took a couple of months of exploring, and then we came down to that place where, I actually have to make a decision. I have to let the rental company know that we don't want to rent the house anymore, and we actually have to move, and there needs to be money for all of that. And the closer and closer it came, the more things weren't lining up and things weren't coming together. And our house was getting more and more packed up, but it wasn't all happening and it wasn't coming together. And then the Lord had a chat with me. I'm out walking with him, as I like to do, and asking him questions about what are we doing and what does it look like and where to now and what are you thinking? And he really did say to me, Kerri-Ann, I'd like you to stay. There's a couple of things happening in your heart right now that I think we should spend some time on. And the best place for you to do that is here. So me being me, like, okay. But did I cry? Yes. Did I go, oh, that's just not fair. I don't want to. Oh my gosh, I want to pack up and move. And did I fight it? Yeah, I did. I'm honest. I did. I had lots of conversations with him about that, and I let him know how that made me feel and what that was all about. But yes, there definitely were things in my heart that were helping facilitate my desire to move, because I kind of was wanting to run away from a couple of things that I didn't want to have to deal with. Oh. And so the Lord was very good to say, hey, you need to deal with that stuff, and I'm going to show you how to do that where you're at. And so we've stayed. We haven't moved yet, even though Sydney calls my name more often than not, and I feel this desire to come and be a part of community down there. The Lord is keeping me safe in this space. And those prophetic words and those dreams, do they not carry something? Well, they do. They carry substance, but it didn't look like the actual physical moving from one location to another. In the spirit, I've moved. I've connected with beautiful people and made amazing friends in Sydney. In the spirit, I've invested in my business in Sydney as much as it is here. There's been a lot of other ways that we have operated in that space, and even having a trip down to Sydney and to spend some time like with Matt and Trish and the beautiful community down there. None of it was wasted. It was just all of a place of understanding where God's heart was in it all. Wow. So if I could use that as an example of receiving a word, holding a word, and then the tension of what does that word look like when it's actually lived out in your life. I have a lot of those encounters and experiences where things have been what I thought they were going to be and what God actually had in mind were quite different things. And the way I've held that and processed that has been in relationship with him and with those closest to me.
So would you say that the original word you misunderstood, or you just needed more understanding on it?
More understanding on it.
Yeah.
I don't think it was not so much a misunderstanding, but it's just not a complete picture.
Yeah.
And so, quite often when we get prophetic words, they are, like I said before, cryptic or a little bit abstract or very picture orientated and not quite like what's the facts of what we have to do. And they call us into that place of having discussion with the Lord where we can actually go, okay, so what does the substance of this actually look like? And is this something that we're moving into now? And what part of it do you want me to carry in this instance? What am I praying into? What doors are you opening? What doors are you closing? It becomes this greater, bigger conversation that you have with him. So for me, it was a case of just coming into that, aligning my lenses to his lenses to see his perspective inside those words and those dreams and the things that he was communicating to me.
I love that, K.A., and thanks for sharing that. There's a sub-conversation going on inside of my head right now, because I remember those times quite clearly, because my brain was going, gee, I'd really love to work with K.A., and what does that actually look like? Did I hear a word from God on it? No, but if you had to come to Sydney then, I wonder whether we'd be doing the things we are doing now.
Exactly.
Like, that's an interesting thought bubble right there. But
yeah. There's
a story in the Bible, and it's one that I often go back to in hearing God speak. It's the one about Abraham and Isaac, where God tells Abraham to sacrifice Isaac. It's the most weirdest concept of of doing life as God has just told me to sacrifice my son. Abraham in the Bible story knows God's voice very, very well, and God told him to move from his homeland. He did. God told him he was going to have a child. He started believing for it. Isaac was the child. Then God said, okay, I want you to sacrifice that child. So Abraham gets himself together, saddles up all the stuff that he needs, and off he goes to find a mountain that he's supposed to sacrifice his child on. And he gets to that mountain, finds that mountain. God's told him this is the mountain. So he's still listening for God's voice. Gets to the top of that mountain and he ties up Isaac. And again, most extraordinary moment that you can imagine as a parent. And God steps in and says, no, you were never meant to sacrifice him. This was just a test of your faith. Now, regardless of what people think about that one story, inside of it is if Abraham held on to the very first word, he would have killed Isaac that day. The concept for me is that Abraham had to stay present in a conversation with him. And so when God showed him what he was going to do now, he was more than up to, as he would be as a parent, was more than up for the conversation that was there, and to be staying present in the conversation. And like you and I have said before in these videos, presence for me is something that's the substance of who God is in these very moments, that he wants to speak to us. And so in your story, 2 years ago, word Sydney became a very strong word in your conversation. I remember having those meetings with you, and the wonder inside of those meetings of what could be or what might be, or all of that stuff started flowing through me. But I watched you go from it is to it might be, it could be, and no, I'm actually staying where I am for the season that I'm in. Is that, am I hearing that right? Because you're listening to God along the whole process?
Absolutely. My word, it was. There was definitely those transition moments through as the conversation allowed with the Lord to open up into that space. And I guess too, recognizing that there was some heart stuff in there, as we would always have to recognize that quite often the things of our heart that we're potentially running from or not wanting to deal with can cause a little bit of a blockage in terms of whether we actually really want to hear what God has to say. So I know that the longer it went on and the more it came down to a deadline, the more I was like, okay, I really need to hear what you're saying here. I really need to know, am I missing this? Have I got it wrong? Am I going in the wrong direction? What is actually your heart? And in some ways, I feel like the Lord was even giving me an opportunity, like, let's going to test her. Let's see, would she actually pack up and go?
Yeah.
Would she go? Just kind of a bit like Abraham as well. Would he go? Would he do what I've asked him to do? So you can look at it from all those different angles, but there definitely was that continuing conversation and me coming into that place of being willing to surrender my heart, my space, my desires, my dreams, my thoughts of what it should look like, to know that he had the best plan for me and I only wanted his best. So if I could hold that space until that was revealed to me, then when I knew that I knew that I knew, it was going to be an easy decision then whether we go or whether we stay.
Wow. How do you reconcile the verse? I remember in a previous episode we talked about band-aiding situations with verses because we've got nothing to say, so there must be a Bible verse that actually can deal with that situation. But one of the verses I have heard on repeat ever since I've been a believer, very much in the last 15 years, is God will give you the desires of your heart. How do you reconcile that verse with, you've just said, I wanted to be in Sydney. I don't know if you really wanted to be in Sydney. You wanted to be with people, right? Like you wanted, you're by the beach, okay? Like I'm not seeing your beach, but I am a beach lover and I'm imagining it's quite divine. Sydney does have beaches, but I don't know. How do you reconcile that verse?
Well, I reconcile that knowing that he knows the desires of my heart. And so what I believe my desire was, like you say, was about connection and community. I'd come from a place of community where I wasn't connected. I now settled into a community where I felt seen, known, heard, loved abundantly by people who don't even live in my area. who aren't just up the road, who I can't just go, can I come over and have a cup of tea? Let's have a chat. Or do you want to come down the beach and have a picnic? You know, like there's no physical meeting up place happening there. And yet my heart's desire was for that. Yet in all that, in this last season, through Zoom meetings and COVID and all that sort of stuff, God knew that heart desire. But I truly believe he knew of something greater than what I could see. And that community and connection was going to form and continue to form. And as he was shifting me out of old mindsets and old things that I thought that I needed into this new paradigm that we have, that we're experiencing inside our community, where we can have such incredible heart-to-heart connection with people without having actually physically been in the same room as each other, but still feel like we've known each other forever and eternity and beyond. Like, I would have missed all of that, the fullness of that expression in that place of moving. So he does know the desires of my heart, but I think I can limit the desires of my heart to my own personal understanding and what I feel to be the immediate needs that I have right now. Whereas he is taking care of not just me, but my entire family. I've watched these last 2 weeks as he steps in as a father, last 2 weeks, last 2 years, steps in that place as a father for my children, being that I'm a single parent. And here he is hearing their heart's desires as well. So if he moved me, and I've got 2 kids who are going, I'm going to hate you if we move because I'm leaving all my friends behind and everything that I love is here and I don't have a desire to move. I get you do, but I don't. And I create that place of moving for them, but their desires get squashed. Where is God in all of that? Like, you have to, I personally step back in this space and go, he's a good father. He's a good husband. He's taking good care of me, but he's taking good care of my family. So he's positioning us exactly where we need to be. And if right now it's here because there's an opportunity to move later, or there's even something better on the cards that's to come, then I can trust him in that space to meet my needs and also see the desires and the dreams in my heart still be fulfilled.
Wow. I love how you process that too, because again, there's a real testing mechanism that sits inside of that place of listening. I'm listening for my kids. I'm listening for the Spirit of God. I'm listening for my circumstances. I'm listening for this word Sydney, and I'm desiring to understand what are the desires of my heart in all of this, and to really boil that down. You know, if we could take this conversation a little bit further, see some of the hardships, I guess, when people are listening for the voice of God and it doesn't come through. The phrase that I often hear is, if I've got that wrong, how many other things have I got wrong? Am I actually even hearing God in the first place? Now, I guess everyone's situation is different, and often when we have thoughts and phrases around like that, some of it is very even detrimental to the place of how do I see God, because we're believing he's saying things that aren't true. And if they're not true, has he just put a carrot in front of me that I've had to run after all these years? And I don't even like carrots. Like, it's that sort of thing. Like, what's he doing inside of that? And disappointment then becomes a very large part of a person's language and dialogue. And like, if I can use a personal experience, when my best mate passed away 15 years ago, I'm supposed to be 15, I remember praying, believing God had said he's going to be healed. Like, when he died and I stood over that grave, I didn't want to ever pray for anyone for healing ever again in my life, Kay, because I'm thinking, if I can't get that right about God saying this guy's healed, like, what else have I got wrong? And like, through a process of unpacking my pain and my hurt and understanding the situation, okay, we can get to a conversation. But in those moments, this is often where people lose faith, because they believe God has spoken, they've got a word from God, and then that word just hasn't happened. You got any thoughts on that?
I think we have to be careful in those moments to not let the loss or the word that hasn't come to pass become the lens or the vision point that we're going to view everything through. in any prophetic word, in any promise, in any encounter experience with the Lord, it's about drawing unto him, to come close, to know him, to know his heart. And when there's places of loss, we can quite easily go into, well, he's just not good, and step into those places of hopelessness and doubt. And I screwed it up and I don't know what's going on and it's all horrible. And that language starts to form. Our God is a God of goodness and kindness and love. Gentle, he's full of hope, he's a safe place to come to. So if we can hold the nature of who he is inside the place of loss and pain, then we will discover more about who we are and who we've been created to be and how he is moving in and through our lives than if we turn away and leave. So, you know, I've been married twice, divorced twice. I've had trauma in my life, in multiple different places. At every opportunity, there was this place to either turn away from God and leave and just go, he's just not who he says he is, or turn in towards him in my pain, allow him to be the comforter, and allow him to reveal truth to me and hold me close, even in places where I don't understand. But when I hold on to who he is and his nature, then there's a chance for him to come and minister and to share and to come close and to recognize the pain that I'm in. And so, you know, when you share your story, I just like, you know, my heart, I feel, you know, like that. Oh, that's so hard. You've prayed, you've believed, you've held on, held on to hope and just everything that you knew that was in that moment. And yet before your eyes, you're seeing your beautiful friend go to be with the Lord, and you're like, what just went wrong? As much as I'd like to say I have all the answers, we don't always, and that's okay, because God's the one with all the answers. And so here, though, is the Lord meeting you in that space to love you abundantly well, even though there's been that loss, even though there's been that heartache. And so that's what I found that he would do with me in all my questions and all my doubts and all my misunderstandings. He still came close and he was still very present, and he still waited patiently to hear my heart and to allow me to express what was going on in my world, because he wanted to know me personally. And so the more I did that, the more I was able to move through those places of hopelessness, through depression, through anxiety, through I just don't hear his voice, and come into the depths of his heart and experience the truth of who he was. Yes, I've had the losses, but they don't have the sting. They don't hold death over me, because I've discovered life in the places where there's been loss.
Wow. Yeah. I love what you're sharing there. One of the phrases you use is, I don't have all the answers. I think it's a beautiful phrase. It's a phrase of going, I can hold this space for you even though I don't have all the answers that surround it. Yeah. And see, as you're speaking, I'm thinking of 1 Corinthians 13, where it talks about when we prophesy, it's like we're looking through a veil, and often what we've heard, the Father wants to give us greater clarity on some of that stuff. And again, you and I have talked about some very real parts that have impacted our world. So it's not as if we're just sort of getting a big broad brush out and saying one size fits all. And we're not. We're slowing each of our conversations down to a unique conversation with God.
Yeah.
And so what worked for you might have been slightly different from what worked with me, but the presence of that moment was we're willing to sit in there. And so when people sit with me and they go, God's told me I'm going to have this man as a husband, or I'm going to have a child, or we're going to live in Sydney, or we're going to move countries, or I'm going to do this, and it hasn't come to bear. There's parts of that where you go, well, we can think creatively around all of that, or we can just be holding that place in presence. And maybe I did misunderstand what God had to say to me. Yeah. Maybe I misheard it. Maybe I allowed some of my own desires to run too fast, and I'm just thinking specifically of my own situation with my best friend who passed away, let alone what other people might be hearing and listening to. But I just want to say to anyone listening that that hope deferred that KA spoke about, that you hope that you had but didn't happen. There are people who want to sit with you in those places.
Mm.
And we may not have all the answers. We may not be able to say why that didn't happen or why that should have happened, but what we do have is the presence to sit with, to care, to love, to comfort, and maybe even to grieve if that hasn't happened. And we're not running away in that. In church experiences, KO, I've had people say, oh, that person doesn't have enough faith. That's why that promise hasn't come to bear. That's the sort of stuff I actually want to just kick out of our thinking. It frustrates me so much when people feel that they can go straight to judge and say things like, you don't have enough faith, or you don't believe enough. I just think that there's a whole question of why, God, didn't you come through, starts from the place of being present with a person.
Mm. Yep. Absolutely. We really just have to keep coming back to him.
Yeah.
And he has this beautiful ability to minister to our hearts exactly where we need it to be happening, in those places of conversation, in those places of leaning into him, to come into, grief is an interesting thing. Hey, like, you go through those so many different waves and experiences inside that place of grief as you process out the loss. But he's in it all, and he can be in it all. He really wants to be in it all. He wants to walk it out with us, and to be in that space, that beautiful holding space that allows you that grace and that place just to process, what is it like for you? What is it like for you? What has that meant to you? What has that experience been like? Where do you want to move forward from here? Like, he wants to be in that space to have that sort of conversation. And he'll either do that, one-on-one with you, or, you'd be blessed to have other people come into that space who can minister with you there too, like yourself, Matt, because you do that so abundantly well. But allowing him to come into that place to do the unveiling of the revelation is that sweet, sweet spot of intimacy. And I think in places of loss and heartache and dreams that we had that we thought were going to be fulfilled, and then we look around and then find it didn't happen, and for whatever reason, because somebody else is involved and they made a different decision, or because the way you heard what you received wasn't the right way to hear it, or like, for whatever reason it is, if anyone's going to do the unveiling and bring you into places of truth, it'll be him.
Yeah.
That's why he sent Jesus. That's why Jesus is that anchor that goes behind the veil. Because we can hold on to him. He's been there before us. And Father will bring us into that place of knowing his heart, what's happened in. He'll just take us into that place of revelation.
Yeah. Yeah, I so agree with what you're saying. And again, there's that experiential, relational aspect that you and I have been chatting about now for a while. Any relationship we're in, it grows, and we discover more about what that relationship is as we commit to the relationship. It's as easy to not commit to a relationship. It's easy to go back to those places of superficial or the facade that we often wear. But these are the moments when, like, the heartbreak or the grief becomes a conversation, which I think as a prayer, it allows God to actually minister into those places. I think as a pastor, I've been in danger of times of the past thinking I have to provide all the answers. And that's why it's so easy at times for us to become judge, where we can say, oh, that's the reason, or that's the reason why you didn't get your heart's desire. That's the reason why. And I don't think Jesus is in that realm at all. I think he's just told us to love. It's that beautiful phrase of Billy Graham where it says it's God's job to judge, the Holy Spirit's job to convict, and my job to love.
Yeah.
I love that phrase, and I use it often with people's lives. And when they come in with all their woundedness and they expect to be judged, but I just want to love them well. Like I sat with a person yesterday who shared a story with me that she felt like disqualified her, and I'm like, from what? you're not disqualifying yourself from relationship with me.
Yeah.
If anything, you've qualified yourself even greater. And I don't even know if that's the right phrase and put it, because you actually chose to open up your spirit and allow your story to be at one here with me.
Yeah.
It allows all of those big questions of why God to start becoming vocalized.
Yeah.
And right there, that's the deeper, it's like a door into the kingdom of a realm of going, I'm actually now asking the real questions.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. And I think, can I just put it in this way, as you're talking and the qualification and the bigger questions and all that, the one scripture that I had in mind for our conversation here was from Luke 24, when it's talking about the road to Emmaus, and Jesus comes to the two disciples. And so this is the death on the cross has taken place. 3 days have passed. The resurrection's happened. This is like about, I guess, the afternoon of the day of resurrection. And here are these two who have heard the promise, who are holding on, trying to go, what just happened? I do not understand what's going on. And Jesus comes and meets them on the road in that conversation. And he takes time to hear their hearts. They ask all those questions. They're trying to figure it all out. And then he takes a moment then, without them realizing that it's Jesus, he then expresses to them the story from Moses all the way through to the prophets to this present moment, and brings them into a place of understanding and lifts the veil so they can see. And the response for them was their hearts burned within them. So now if Jesus will do that for two disciples on the road after he's died and resurrected, and they're trying to come into understanding, how much more will he do that for us? He's interested in hearing our hearts, all the questions, all the whys, and I don't understand. And then he wants to show us the truth of the prophecy, truth of what is happening, the truth of the story that is unfolding in our lives, and bring us into places of knowing his heart and the truth of who he is. And I love that, because it brought their hearts into a place of being on fire again.
Yeah.
And my encounters, my experiences with him have been the same. In those places of deep, deep loss and deep, deep hurt, as I've met with him, asked all the questions, had those conversations, received some unveiling and revelation from him in whatever context it looked like, for whatever I needed in that moment, it brought me back to a place to still be passionately in love with him. And I think if we can learn how to steward that place in places of loss where we've had prophecy and things have not been answered and things have not been fulfilled and we don't understand why, if we can come into these places of encounter and presence with him where we still find our hearts ignited and in fire and in love with him, then we're going to be restored in ways that are beyond our understanding.
Love it. It's a prophecy to end with, I think, beyond what we can understand. We're going to be restored. Okay, again, it's been awesome just to hang out with you in this one conversation. It's been and that's a heavy subject as well.
It is.
And just wanting to hold even anyone who's listening just well in that, and never to minimize what a person's gone through or what they've held on to. And just to know that their story is important than my story or KA's story. And as Jesus met with the two from Emmaus, so he wants to meet with us in that story as well.
Amen.
Thanks, KA. I'm going to put your details for people to get in contact with you in the link below. But there is more yet to come, my friends. There's more questions. So if you've got questions you want us to answer, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we're more than happy to engage with those big burning questions that might be in or on your hearts. Bless you all, and we shall see you all soon.
Connect with Greater Things International on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, or at greaterthingsinternational.com.